My apologies for the sound quality in the last lecture. The background noise might have been a little bit higher than the previous lectures. The microphone was positioned in a bit of a weird way, but this lecture should be good and all of the background noise removed, so nothing should get in the way. Now in this lecture, we want to finish up our product page. So right now our product page looks like this, and eventually we want to finish up the custom drop-down selector and also make sure that the images are working properly. And in the next section, we will take a look at the mini cart, where we can remove items from the mini cart. And whenever we add items to the mini cart, it opens right away. So let's go ahead and take a look at our product page template. So we can go into templates and open the product.liquid file. And let's hit save on that. And let's close the collection page, the product card, and theme.liquid just to clean it up a little bit. So right now we can take a look at the product template, and then it's inside of a container. And the container is basically applying the padding. And then we have the product images div where we have the image inside. And then we're looping over all of the images. And the bottom section, we have the product description and our add to cart form. And then for the product images, we want to be able to use Swiper again. So let's actually remove all of this. So let's hit save that. And actually we need to go back into our snippet of product card.liquid, and we can just grab all of this here and copy it. And then we can just close that. And then inside of the product images, we can just paste everything we have from the product card because it's essentially the same thing. The only thing that we will change is this class name here. And we'll say swiper container dash product dash page. Then just like in the collection page, we're looping over the product images and naming each one image. And then we're grabbing the image URL here and we're assigning a master. And then we have the alt for the image as well. Then the buttons will also stay the same. Now at the bottom here, let's actually go back into the product card and we'll just grab the script for the swiper. And we can just paste that here as well. And essentially everything stays the same. So let's now hit save and go back to our product page and refresh. And we can see that it sort of works, but it kind of messing up a little bit. So let's go ahead and fix that. Inside of the application.scss at the very bottom, let's go ahead and create a new comment. And we'll call this start product template. And now let's go ahead and fix the image by saying .swiper container product page. And inside of here, we'll say overflow hidden and width 100% and height 100%. So let's save that and go back to our product page and hit refresh. And we can see now that the images are working properly. But this isn't how we want the arrows to look like. Because in our finished product, we can see that we have the ghost image of the arrows. And then once we hover, the arrows disappear. And it's a nice little touch, and it shows that you can click on the arrows here. So we'll come back to the arrows, but first let's format this page properly, because it's going to fit into the way that the image is also affected. So we'll go to the bottom here and we'll say .product template, because if you remember, that's the class name that we have over here. And we'll say padding top 25 pixels. And we'll do display grid. And we're going to basically copy the same way that we did the grid template columns of our collection page. And we can just do a calculation and say 100% minus 25 pixels. And then we'll divide this by 2. And for the other part, it will be the same thing. And then we'll give it justify content space between. And then margin bottom, we can say 32 pixels. And then we can add right away the phone. So we can say include phone, and it will be grid template columns. And we'll say 100% because we'll want it to take up the full space. So let's hit save and see what we have. And there we go. Now the image is taking up a good portion of the screen here. And the description is also taking up just 50%. And now that we have done that, let's go ahead and do the arrows. Just underneath the phone include, we'll say dot swiper button next. And then we'll grab the before here. And we'll create the placeholder for that arrow. So we can say background URL. And then just like we did before, we'll include the arrow. This one should actually be right. And then after the pipe, we can say asset URL. And then we'll give it 24 pixels as the width. And we'll center it and say that we do not want this background image to be repeated. Perfect. And then we'll give it content of empty again. And opacity will be 20.25. And we'll say width 100% and height 100%. Then this will be position absolute. So we'll say top 0 and left 0. And then we want to make sure that when we're hovering over it, that the placeholder arrow is not just disappearing, but we want it to transition out. So we'll say transition opacity, and then we'll say 0.15 seconds. And then we'll say background position, and we'll give it a calculation of 100% minus 30 pixels. And we can do the same thing for the other side as well. Except here we'll say left. And here we'll say left. This should be previous, excuse me. But essentially everything should be the same now. Let's hit save and see what we have. Okay, so we have these arrows now, but as we can see, this arrow is a little bit off center, and that's because we changed the background position. So we can just remove this for the previous one. And if we refresh now, we can see that the arrow moves back into the place it's supposed to be. Great. Now let's remove them once we actually hover over the image. And just at the bottom here, we can say .product images, hover. And then when we hover over that, we want to be able to control the swiper button previous. before and also next as well. And we'll say opacity 0. So now when we hover over the images, we're going to change the opacity, but because we have the transition for opacity here, it will take a few seconds to fulfill that. And let's see how that looks. So we can see here that they kind of just change gradually instead of just disappearing right away. We can also see that the image is a little bit more elongated here, whereas ours is just a square. But this is only due to the fact that the image is a little bit smaller there. So as we can see here, the image is also elongated when we make it smaller. And we can see that it's square here as well. All right, perfect. So now let's jump into the custom selector here and style that as well. So I actually just realized that we already have a product template in our SCSS file, and it's located just over at the top here. Start product page. So let's go ahead and copy this now, and we'll just cut it and move it to the very bottom. And then we can remove this comment and basically combine the two sections that we created. And we can see here that we have already styled the product template. So we can basically just remove this as well. Everything else is good. So we have the product description container, that we did display flex. Then we have the product description, which is 50%. And here we can also add the phone view, and we can say width 100%. Then we have the product title and the product option row. So let's go ahead and save that. And then just at the bottom, let's go ahead and type in product option label. And then we'll also choose the add to cart button. And let's go ahead and style these. But before we do that, let's save it and see what we're supposed to be building. As we can see here, we have borders on all of our selectors, and they're just on the top and the bottom. And then the add to cart button changes to black, and the text changes to white whenever we hover over it. And then for the selectors, we have this gray hover effect. And then when we click on it, this gray hover effect goes into the selectors as well. All right, so back inside of our code, let's go ahead and give padding of 25 pixels. We can give it position of relative, as well as border solid. And the cursor will be a pointer, and border color black, and then border width will be 1 pixel, and 0. And this is just a more refined way of setting the pixels. And then we'll say border right color transparent, and then border left color transparent as well. So we're basically setting the border for everything to black, and then we're just changing the right and left sides to be transparent. And we'll say background color to be white, and font size, we'll just increase it and say 16 pixels. So let's hit save and take a look at what we get. All right, so we got the borders, but This one is full width, and then these ones are not full width. So let's go ahead and change that as well. So we actually need to go back into the add to cart form and change this ID to be a class. And we can just hit save here and close it for now. And since some of these didn't really make it all the way to the end here, we can give it a width of 100%. And there we go. So now the borders went all the way, but also the text. So let's go ahead and say text align left. And let's hit save there. And now the text is all aligned left. Perfect. But we can see here that the add to cart button is actually all capitalized. So let's go back here, copy the add to cart button class, and we'll give it a text transform of uppercase and see what we're working with. So now when we click on the buttons, they kind of appear, but not the way that we want it to be. And also we don't have the hover effect. So let's go ahead and add those. Now for the add to cart button, we can add an ampersand and add the hover effect. And we can say background color to be black. And then the color of the text to be white. And then for the product option label, we can also copy that and give it a hover effect as well. And the hover effect background will be a little bit darker than what it is right now. So we'll give it a ED, ED, ED. And this is just like a light gray. All right, perfect. So we have our hover effect working now. And let's take care of the options. Going to the bottom again, let's add a new class name and we'll say product option list. And we'll give it a position of absolute. And then we'll say bottom 70 pixels. And it's going to be position absolute in relative to the product option label. And then we'll say right 0 and left 0. And then background color will be white as well. And then border will say solid 1 pixel and black. So let's take a look at what that does. Okay, so they do go up, but now we actually need to change the product option items and add padding there and also a line in between them, as we can see in our example here. And we can see that the line above them is much thinner than these other ones. So it's a very slight difference. So here we can say product option item, and we'll give it a padding of 25 pixels, and cursor will be pointer as well. And then what we can do is add an ampersand and say nth child and plus 2, and we'll give it a box shadow inset 0, 1 pixel, and then we'll give it a light gray. And what this does is, instead of using a border, we're basically creating a very small box shadow. that can be made to be much thinner than a border. And then over here as well, we can say ampersand and hover and say that we want the background color to be the same as the other ones. So let's hit save there and take a look at how that looks. So let's click on one of these selectors and we can see that it works the way it should. Perfect. And we see that the cursor is a pointer, indicating that these can be clicked. And then we can change the sizes. So there's a small error over here where we don't have the colon to indicate the break between the size and the actual variant. So let's go ahead back into our product option row. And over here, just after option name, we can put this colon. And if we hit save, we'll go back here and we should be able to see the colon. All right, perfect. So the product page is pretty much done. Now, of course, we don't have the footer, but other than that, the product page looks exactly like our example site. So I'll see you in the next section where we're going to start building out the mini cart. And the mini cart is definitely going to be a pretty long section. It's going to involve some Vue.js and a lot of styling. So I hope you're up for it. I'll see you in the next section.